The ancient mop bucket had a broken wheel that squeaked with every push. David had learned to angle it just right, so the squeak turned into more of a whisper, but today he was too distracted to care. Through the tall windows of the ceremonial hall, he could see ships landing every few minutes, each one bigger and flashier than the last. Princes and nobles from across 3-star systems, all here for the same reason. Queen Sereth was finally choosing a consort. David dipped his mop into the soapy water and kept working. The marble floors needed to shine before the ceremony started in 3 hours. He had been working at the palace complex for almost 2 years now, ever since his teaching job back on Earth disappeared along with the university's funding. The pay here was decent enough to send money home for his sister's medical bills, and honestly, he liked the quiet early mornings before everyone else arrived. The grand hall stretched out like a canyon made of gold and crystal. Dragon architecture favored height and space, making humans feel appropriately small. David had read somewhere that it was intentional, a reminder of the natural order. He did not mind. After spending his adult life in cramped university offices and tiny apartments, the sheer scale of everything here felt freeing rather than intimidating. Something caught his eye near the eastern wall. A section of scaffolding left behind by yesterday's decorators revealed a small alcove he had never noticed before. David wheeled his bucket over and peered inside. His breath caught. Sitting on a dusty shelf were 3 objects that looked incredibly old. A carved stone tablet, a ceremonial blade with a wrapped handle, and a small bronze statue of a dragon in flight. He should probably tell someone about this discovery. Instead, David carefully pulled out his cleaning cloth and began wiping away centuries of dust. The tablet had inscriptions in old Draconic script. He recognized some of the characters from the language books he studied during lunch breaks. Something about fire and sky and the first queen. The blade was still sharp despite its age. The statue fit perfectly in his palm, warm somehow despite the cool air. David spent the next hour carefully cleaning all 3 pieces, then arranged them on the shelf in what he hoped was proper historical order. Tablet first, then blade, then the statue facing outward as if keeping watch. He took a photo with his data pad to research later, then reluctantly went back to mopping. By the time officials started arriving, the floors gleamed like glass. David pushed his bucket toward the service corridors, trying to stay invisible. That was the trick to this job. Be there when needed, disappear when not. Most aliens barely registered that humans existed unless directly spoken to. The ceremony began with traditional dragon songs that made the windows vibrate. David watched from behind a pillar near the back, technically still on duty in case any spills needed immediate attention. The throne at the far end of the hall sat 15 feet high, and Queen Sereth looked carved from stone herself as she gazed down at the assembled crowd. She was terrifying in the way ancient things are terrifying. Not aggressive, just overwhelmingly real. Her scales caught the light in shades of deep blue and silver. Her eyes were the color of molten gold. When she spoke, everyone felt it in their chest. Let the selection begin. The first prince was a Valtorian named Grevin who wore so many medals they clinked when he walked. He boasted about his military victories for 10 solid minutes. Queen Sereth listened without expression, then said simply, "Next." The second prince brought gifts, chests of precious metals and gems from his home system. He promised wealth beyond measure. The queen looked at the treasure like someone had offered her a pile of dirt. Next. The third prince was a dragon himself from one of the outer colonies. He spoke of pure bloodlines and traditional values. Queen Sereth's tail twitched once, which David had learned was a sign of irritation. Next, it went on like that for hours, each prince more elaborate than the last, each one dismissed with a single word. Some tried magic demonstrations. Others recited poetry. One even challenged the queen to ritual combat, which got him escorted out by guards. David found himself genuinely curious about what she actually wanted. None of these obviously powerful and accomplished beings seemed to be right. During a brief recess, David was emptying a trash receptacle near one of the side galleries when he heard footsteps. Not the clicking of claws on marble, but the softer pad of feet in their more human-like form. He turned and nearly dropped his trash bag. Queen Sereth stood 10 feet away, Studying him up close, she was even more overwhelming. Even in her more compact form, she towered over him. But her eyes were what caught him. They looked tired, lonely maybe. He had seen that expression before in his teaching days, on students who excelled at everything but had no real friends. "You work here," she said. "Not a question." "Yes, Your Majesty." "Maintenance staff." David was proud that his voice only shook a little. "You found the old alcove this morning. I saw you on the security feed." His stomach dropped. "I'm sorry. I should have reported it immediately. I just wanted to make sure the artifacts were properly cared for before." She held up one clawed hand. "You arranged them correctly. Chronological order, with the guardian statue facing outward." "How did you know?" "I read a lot," David admitted. "Dragon history is fascinating. The way your people preserve cultural memory across centuries, it's incredible. Most humans can barely remember what happened 50 years ago." Something shifted in her expression. The gold eyes studied him differently now, like she was actually seeing him instead of looking through him. "What is your name?" "David, Your Majesty." "David Shun." She nodded slowly, then turned and walked back toward the throne room. David exhaled and went back to collecting trash, assuming that was the end of it. The ceremony resumed. 3 more princes presented themselves. 3 more ejections. The crowd was getting restless, murmuring about tradition and duty. Then Queen Sereth stood, her full height making everyone fall silent. "I have made my choice." The remaining princes straightened, each one clearly hoping to be named. The Dragon Council leaned forward. Every eye in the hall focused on the queen. She raised one arm and pointed directly at the back of the room, directly at David. Him. The trash bag slipped from David's fingers and hit the floor with a wet thud. Every head in the hall turned to stare at him. He could not breathe, could not move, could not process what just happened. This had to be a mistake. Had to be. But Queen Sereth was still pointing, and her golden eyes were locked on his, and she was not smiling, but something in her expression looked almost hopeful. The hall erupted into chaos. End of part 1. 3 Dragon Council members were shouting at once. Prince Grevin had drawn his ceremonial sword, though no one was quite sure what he planned to do with it. The Valtorian delegation was filing a formal protest in real time. Somewhere in the chaos, David heard his own ambassador's voice rising in panicked confusion. He stood frozen at the back of the hall, still holding his mop handle like it might protect him from reality. Queen Sereth remained perfectly still on her throne, waiting for the noise to die down. It took almost 15 minutes. When silence finally returned, it was the kind of quiet that comes right before a storm. "The selection is complete," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly through the massive space. "According to ancient law, the Queen's choice is absolute and final. This gathering is concluded. Your Majesty, this is madness." High Chancellor Vorthen spread his wings in a dominance display that made several smaller species duck. A human? A maintenance worker? This insults every noble family in attendance. Then they are welcome to be insulted. Sereth descended from her throne in 3 powerful strides. "The ceremony is traditional, not mandatory. I could have chosen no one. Instead, I have chosen. The law is satisfied." David finally found his voice. "Your Majesty, there must be some mistake. I am nobody. I clean floors. I take out trash. You can't possibly." Those golden eyes fixed on him again, and the words died in his throat. "Come," she said simply, then walked toward a side exit. After a moment of pure panic, David followed. What else could he do? The next 3 hours felt like falling down a very long, very confusing hole. He was taken to guest quarters that were bigger than his entire apartment back on Earth. A team of dragon attendants measured him for formal clothes while looking deeply uncomfortable about the whole situation. Someone brought him food. He was too nervous to eat. His data pad exploded with messages from friends, family, and news outlets he had never heard of. The human ambassador arrived looking like she might pass out. Her name was Patricia Okonkwo, and David had met her exactly twice before, both times when she was touring the facilities. "What did you do?" She was not angry, just completely baffled. "I cleaned some artifacts this morning and talked to her for maybe 2 minutes." Patricia sat down heavily. The Dragon Council is threatening to call a vote of no confidence. For different princes are demanding duels. The Valtorian Empire might pull out of the trade agreements. All because you cleaned some artifacts. I arranged them chronologically, David said weakly. And I might have said something about cultural memory preservation. Oh my God. Patricia put her head in her hands. You accidentally impressed an 847-year-old dragon queen by being a history nerd. A soft knock interrupted them. A dragon attendant entered and bowed slightly. The queen requests David's presence in the royal library. Alone. Patricia gripped his arm. Be careful. Be respectful. And for the love of everything, try not to accidentally get engaged or start a war. The library was in a tower that spiraled up into the clouds. David climbed for what felt like forever, his legs burning. When he finally reached the top, Queen Sereth was waiting by a window, looking out over the city. She had shifted into a form that was more human in proportions, though still clearly dragon. It felt less overwhelming, which he suspected was intentional. You are afraid, she observed without turning around. Terrified, Your Majesty. Good. Fear means you understand the weight of this. She gestured to a chair. Seat. We need to talk like actual people, not queen and subject. David sat, though his back stayed rigid. Why me? I'm serious. There were dozens of qualified candidates. Powerful, important people. Everyone else saw a prize. Sereth turned to face him. A throne to share, an empire to influence, a line to continue. They looked at me and calculated what they could gain. And I didn't. You looked at forgotten artifacts and saw history that deserved respect. You have worked in my palace for 2 years. I have watched you. She must have seen his expression because she added, not in a predatory way. Security footage reviews. I watch many people. It is part of ruling. That's slightly less creepy. A sound escaped her that might have been a laugh. You treat everyone the same. The High Council members and the other janitors. You are curious about our culture without trying to exploit it. Last month, you spent your break helping that young dragon understand an Earth historical text for his studies. David remembered. A teenager struggling with Shakespeare for an assignment. Henry V is confusing even for humans. I just explained some context. You did not have to. He was not important. Helping him gained you nothing. Sereth moved closer. Do you know how rare that is? True kindness without calculation? I have lived 8 centuries. I have seen perhaps a dozen beings who possess it genuinely. I'm still just a janitor. You were a teacher. She said it gently. I know why you are here. Your sister's medical expenses. The university closure. You took this position because you needed money, but you do the work with dignity. You read our history books during lunch. You learn our language. You care. David felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. You really did your research. I am considering binding my life to someone. Of course I researched. Sereth sat across from him. I know this is sudden and terrifying. I know you did not ask for this. So I am offering you a choice. A choice. Traditional bonding has a trial period. 30 days where we spend time together, learn each other, decide if this can work. At the end, either party can walk away with no dishonor. Her golden eyes held his. I will not trap you in this. If you want to refuse, you can. I will handle the political fallout. Why do I feel like there's a but coming? But I'm asking you to try. Give me 30 days. Let me show you what this life could be. Learn about our bonding traditions, our culture, what being a consort actually means. She leaned forward slightly. You love learning. Think of it as the most intensive cultural education program in existence. David should refuse. This was insane. He was a 32-year-old failed teacher who could barely afford rent. She was an immortal queen who ruled star systems. Nothing about this made sense. But that look in her eyes, that loneliness he had recognized earlier, it was still there under all the royal composure. 30 days, he heard himself say, but I have conditions. Her eyebrows rose. You are negotiating with a dragon queen. You said to talk like actual people. David took a breath. I need to be able to contact my family. I need honest answers about what this actually involves. And if I'm going to do this, you have to let me keep working a few hours a week. Not the trash collection, maybe, but something. I'll go crazy if I'm just decorative. Sareth was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, really smiled, and it transformed her entire face. Agreed. All of it. They shook hands, her scaled palm warm against his skin. Outside the window, the sun was setting over the dragon capital, painting the sky in shades of fire. David had no idea what he was doing, but for the first time since leaving Earth, he felt like maybe, possibly, he was exactly where he needed to be into part 2. The formal dinner was a disaster from the first course. David sat at an absurdly long table surrounded by Dragon Council members who looked like they were attending a funeral. His tutor, an elderly dragon named Lady Rothman, had spent 3 days teaching him proper dining etiquette. He remembered maybe half of it. The third claw is for grains, the second for proteins, the first for ceremonial offerings, she had explained patiently. David looked down at his hands. Humans had fingers, not claws. This was already going poorly. High Chancellor Vorthen sat directly across from him, radiating disapproval. Tell me, David of Earth, what do you know of the Treaty of Broken Stars? It was clearly a test. David took a sip of water to buy time. The treaty that ended the war between the dragon clans about 400 years ago, it established the council system and unified the empire. Vorthen's eyes narrowed. A basic answer. Any child knows this. Right, but most people don't know that it almost failed because the northern clans wanted different seasonal migration rights. The compromise was brilliant, actually, by rotating the council seats every 20 years instead of every 10. You gave each clan enough time to make meaningful changes without letting any one group dominate. It turned your biggest weakness, the clan divisions, into a strength through mandatory cooperation. The table went quiet. Vorthen stared at him. You read this? I've read most of your historical archives that are available in the public database. The treaty negotiations are fascinating. There's this one ambassador, I forget his name, but he basically invented modern dragon diplomacy by David caught himself. I get excited about history. Occupational hazard from my teaching days. Something shifted in the room's atmosphere. Council member Mirith, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. You were a teacher, high school history, Earth history, mostly, but I loved learning about other cultures. That's kind of why I'm here. I mean, not here at this dinner, here on Drakmore. The chance to learn about your civilization up close, even as a janitor, was worth the lousy pay. Mirith made a sound that might have been amusement. Most humans who come here only want to trade or mine resources. Yeah, well, most humans are missing out. Your culture has survived for thousands of years while mine keeps forgetting important lessons every few generations. I'd rather learn from people who actually remember their history. Lady Rothman caught his eye and made a subtle gesture. He was holding his water glass wrong. Again, David adjusted his grip and tried to remember which direction to pass the serving dish. Left? Right? Toward the head of the table. He passed it right. 3 council members winced. Apparently left was correct. My apologies, David said. Still learning the protocols. But if you're willing to teach me the right way, I'd love to understand why we pass left. There's usually good reasoning behind these traditions. Vorthen looked like he had bitten something sour. It represents the flow of time. Past to future, left to right. That's elegant. Earth has similar concepts, but we never standardize them across cultures. Every region developed different dining customs, and now nobody remembers why we do half of what we do. It just is. The dinner continued with David making small mistakes and asking genuine questions about each one. By the end of the meal, 3 council members were actually explaining dragon customs to him instead of just criticizing his errors. Vorthen still looked skeptical, but he had stopped actively glaring. After dinner, David found Sareth waiting in the garden outside the hall. She was in her full dragon form, scales gleaming under the moonlight. You survived, she observed. Barely. I have so much to learn. David sat on a stone bench, exhausted. This is your life? Every meal is a political performance. Most meals, yes. She settled onto the grass, her massive form somehow graceful. Does it frighten you? Honestly, it's exhausting, but it's also kind of amazing. Every tradition has meaning. Every ritual serves a purpose. Humans lost a lot of that. We got so focused on efficiency that we forgot why the traditions mattered in the first place. Sareth tilted her head, studying him. You keep comparing your people unfavorably to mine, because you do so many things better. The way you preserve knowledge, maintain cultural continuity, respect your elders and their wisdom. Humans could learn a lot. We also struggle to adapt. Our traditions can become chains. She looked up at the stars. I have watched species rise and fall. Dragons endure, yes, but sometimes I wonder if we endure too much. If we hold on to the past so tightly that we cannot grow. David considered this. Maybe that's why you need an outsider's perspective. Someone who comes from a species that changes too fast to balance one that changes too slowly. Perhaps. Her golden eyes found his. Tell me about your sister. You send her money every month. The change of subject startled him. Sarah. She has a chronic condition that requires expensive treatment. Our parents died when I was 22. I've been taking care of her since then. This is why you left Earth. Why you took a position so far below your qualifications. The treatment keeps her stable. Without it, David shrugged, not wanting to finish that sentence. Some things matter more than career advancement. And you never resented her for it. Never. The answer came instantly. She's my sister. Family takes care of each other. That's not a burden. It's just what you do. Sareth was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. My previous consort died, defending our people from raiders. He put himself between me and an energy weapon, even though I am far more durable than he was. I asked him once why he did it. He said the same thing you just did. That protecting those you love is just what you do. I'm sorry you lost him. It was 200 years ago. But thank you. She shifted slightly, lowering her massive head closer to his level. The council thinks I'm foolish for choosing you. They see a weak human with no political connections or military power. They're not wrong. They are completely wrong. They see what you lack. I see what you possess. One clawed hand gestured around them. You have been here for 11 days. You have learned more about our culture than most diplomats learn in years. You ask questions not to find weaknesses, but because you genuinely care about the answers. And you treat palace staff with the same respect you show the High Council. That's just basic decency. Exactly. Basic decency is far rarer than you think, especially in positions of power. She lowered her head until they were nearly eye level. I chose you because you are good. Not powerful, not connected, not strategic. Just genuinely, thoroughly good. And I have lived too long surrounded by people who are none of those things. David felt his throat tighten. I don't know if I could be what you need. You already are. You simply do not see it yet. A sound interrupted them. Rapid footsteps, someone running. Lady Rothman appeared at the garden entrance, her expression alarmed. Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion. There has been an incident. Sareth rose instantly. What kind of incident? David's evening meal was poisoned. The kitchen staff discovered it during routine testing. If he had eaten in his quarters instead of attending the dinner. She trailed off. The implication cleared that David's blood went cold. Someone had tried to kill him. Sareth's roar shook the garden walls. Her wings spread wide, and her eyes blazed with fury. Find who did this. Now, I want every piece of food tested, every staff member questioned, and double David's security immediately. Already being done, Your Majesty. Sareth turned to David, her rage still visible but controlled. You will stay in my personal quarters tonight. They're the most secure location in the palace. I don't want to cause more trouble. Someone just tried to murder you. We are far past worrying about causing trouble. She shifted back into her more human-like form. Kulme, we have much to discuss about who might want you dead. David stood on shaking legs. 11 days into this trial period, and someone already hated him enough to attempt assassination. This was going to be a very long 30 days. Into part 3. The security investigation took 3 days and revealed exactly what Sareth suspected. Prince Halvik, the dragon from the outer colonies who had proposed during the selection ceremony, had paid a kitchen worker to add poison to David's food. The substance would have been harmless to most species, but lethal to humans within minutes. Halvik was banished from Drakmor immediately. The kitchen worker was arrested, and David found himself surrounded by 4 guards whenever he left the royal quarters. "This is insane," he told Ruth, one of the other human maintenance workers who had become his friend over the past 2 years. They were having coffee in a small staff lounge, guards standing awkwardly by the door. "I can't live like this." Ruth was in her 60s, pragmatic and unimpressed by drama. "You're dating a queen. Someone's always going to be mad about it. We're not dating. It's a trial period. Very different. Honey, she nearly tore the palace apart when she found out someone poisoned you. That's not trial period behavior. That's love." David nearly choked on his coffee. "It's been 2 weeks. So, dragons live for centuries. 2 weeks is like a decade for them." Ruth stirred sugar into her cup. "Question is, how do you feel about her?" He thought about the past 14 days. The long conversations about history and culture. The way Sereth listened when he talked, really listened instead of just waiting to speak. How she had shown him the royal archives and let him touch manuscripts that were older than human civilization. The quiet moments in the garden where they just sat together, comfortable in silence. "I'm falling for her," he admitted quietly. "Which is terrifying because I'm going to be dead in 60 years and she'll still have 700 more to go. Love's not about how long it lasts. It's about what you do with the time you get." Ruth patted his hand. "Now stop moping and go do something useful. I didn't train you to be useless just because you got fancy quarters." That conversation was still running through David's head when he requested a formal meeting with the Dragon Council. Ambassador Okonkwo tried to talk him out of it. "They're looking for any excuse to reject this match," she warned. "Going in front of them voluntarily is dangerous." "I need to try." David straightened his formal jacket. It still felt weird wearing expensive clothes. "If they're going to judge me anyway, I want them to judge the real me, not rumors or assumptions." The council chamber was circular, with seats arranged in tiers that rose toward the domed ceiling. David stood in the center, feeling very small and very human. 12 council members looked down at him with expressions ranging from curious to hostile. High Chancellor Vorthen spoke first. "You requested this audience. Speak." David took a breath. "I know you think I'm wrong for Queen Sereth. You see a human with no military power, no political connections, no wealth. You're not wrong about any of that." Several council members shifted. They had clearly expected him to argue. "But I want to explain why someone like me might actually be valuable to dragons. Not despite my limitations, but because of them." He gestured around the chamber. "You live for centuries. You remember things that happened 1,000 years ago like they were yesterday. That's incredible, but it also means you think in terms of centuries. Long-term planning, generational strategies." Counselor Mirith leaned forward. "This is a strength, not a weakness." "Absolutely. But you rule dozens of species who don't live that long. Humans live maybe 80 years. Voltorians get about 60. The Kesh barely make 40. David met her eyes. "To you, 30 years is a blink. To us, it's half a lifetime. When your policies take 100 years to show results, entire generations of shorter-lived species are born, live, and die without seeing the benefits." The chamber was very quiet now. "I'm not saying your approach is wrong," David continued. "I'm saying you might benefit from someone who understands what it feels like when time moves fast. Someone who knows the desperation of needing results now, not in 50 years. Someone who can help translate between species that measure time in centuries and species that measure it in decades." Vorthen studied him with new intensity. "You propose to be a bridge. I propose to be exactly what I am. A human who respects dragon culture but understands human urgency. Maybe that's valuable. Maybe it's not. But it's honest." "And the assassination attempt?" another counselor asked. "Does that not frighten you away?" "Of course it frightened me. I'm still terrified." David shrugged. "But fear's never been a good reason to quit. If I ran every time something scared me, I'd never have left Earth in the first place." Counselor Mirith made a sound that was definitely amusement. "You are either very brave or very foolish. Probably both." David allowed himself a small smile. "Look, I know this is unprecedented. I know it's uncomfortable. But Queen Sereth chose me for reasons that make sense to her. I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove those reasons are valid, not through grand gestures or political maneuvering, just by being useful and learning and trying to help however I can. And if we refuse, Vorthen's tone was neutral, giving nothing away. Then I'll respect that decision. I'm not here to cause problems. I'm here because someone I'm starting to care about very much asked me to try, and I don't quit on people I care about. The council members looked at each other. Some kind of silent communication passed between them. Finally, Vorthen spoke. We will observe this trial period as tradition demands. But know this, human, if you harm our queen in any way, intentionally or through weakness, there's no place in this galaxy you can hide. Understood. And for what it's worth, I'd expect nothing less. He was dismissed. Outside the chamber, his legs nearly gave out from relief. Ambassador Okonkwo caught his arm. That was either brilliant or suicidal. I'm going with brilliant until proven otherwise. 3 more weeks passed in a blur. David spent mornings learning council procedures with Lady Rothman. Afternoons were for cultural studies and language practice. Evenings he spent with Sereth, talking about everything and nothing. She showed him dragon art galleries. He introduced her to human literature. They argued about philosophy and laughed at stupid jokes and slowly, carefully, built something real. The night before the trial period ended, they sat in the garden under unfamiliar stars. David had been on Drakmore for almost 3 months now. Earth felt very far away. Tomorrow you can leave, Sereth said quietly. No dishonor, no consequences. You can go home. Is that what you want? I want you to choose freely. She turned to face him. I will not trap you here out of obligation or guilt. David thought about his tiny apartment on Earth, his teaching job that no longer existed, his sister, who was doing better now thanks to the money he had been sending. He thought about the past 30 days, the most intense and meaningful of his entire life. I'm not leaving, he said. I mean, if you still want me to stay. I know I'm a disaster at formal dinners, and I keep asking too many questions, and she kissed him. It was his first kiss with someone who had scales and could breathe fire, and it was perfect. When they broke apart, she was smiling. The bonding ceremony is in 7 days. That gives you time to prepare and inform your family. 7 days to prepare for a magical soul bond with an immortal dragon queen. No pressure, none whatsoever. Her eyes sparkled with humor. Welcome to the family, David Chun. He laughed and kissed her again under alien stars and felt more at home than he had in years into part 4. The bonding ceremony required 3 days of preparation that David was fairly certain would kill him before the actual ritual. There were purification baths that smelled like sulfur, meditation sessions where he was supposed to clear his mind, but mostly just thought about how uncomfortable sitting cross-legged for 3 hours was, and lessons about the ancient bonding magic that went completely over his head. The bond will connect your life force to hers, Lady Rothman explained for the 5th time. You will feel her presence always. Her emotions will echo in your mind. And when you eventually die, she paused delicately. She'll feel it. I know. David had read extensively about dragon bonding over the past week. It was beautiful and tragic in equal measure. She's already lived through this once, which makes her choice to bond again even more significant. Most dragons who lose a bonded mate never risk that pain a second time. The weight of that settled on David's shoulders. Sereth was choosing to love him, knowing exactly how much it would hurt when he died. That kind of courage made his own nervousness seem small by comparison. His sister called from Earth the night before the ceremony. Sarah looked healthy, which made the ache of missing her both better and worse. You're really doing this? She asked. Bonding with an alien dragon queen? I really am. And you're happy? David thought about Sereth, the way she laughed at his terrible jokes, how she listened to his rambling explanations about human history, the quiet moments when they read together in comfortable silence. Happier than I've been in years. Then I'm happy for you. Sarah wiped her eyes. I wish I could be there. The trip would be too hard on you, and we both know it. But I'll send you recordings. All of them. You'll feel like you were there. You better. I want to see my big brother marrying space royalty. It's not marriage, it's bonding. There's a difference. Whatever, space husband. Just promise me you'll visit Earth sometimes. I'm not losing my brother completely. I promise. Nothing could keep me away. They talked for another hour about nothing important. When the call ended, David felt the distance between them like a physical thing. But he also felt certain about his choice. Some paths took you away from home. That did not make them wrong. The bonding ceremony began at dawn. The temple was carved directly into a mountain, open to the sky. Thousands of dragons and other species filled every available space. Camera drones hovered everywhere, broadcasting to 3-star systems. David tried not to think about how many people were watching, that he wore simple, formal clothes in shades of blue. Sareth had insisted he not dress like a dragon, that the bond should join them as they were, not as they pretended to be. The outfit was still fancier than anything he had ever owned, but at least he could move in it. The Dragon Council lined the path to the altar. High Chancellor Vorthen nodded slightly as David passed. Not quite approval, but acknowledgement. He would take it. Sareth waited at the altar in her full dragon form. Sunlight caught her scales, making her look carved from sapphire and silver. She was terrifying and beautiful, and David's heart hammered against his ribs. The ceremony master, an ancient dragon named Kelthus, began the ritual in Old Draconic. David had practiced his responses phonetically, hoping desperately he would not accidentally say something inappropriate. Languages were tricky when you did not have a right throat structure for half the sounds. Do you come freely to this bond? Kelthus asked in the common tongue. Ido. David's voice carried surprisingly well. Public speaking skills from teaching finally proving useful. Do you understand that this bond will tie your life to hers, your death to her grief, your existence to her memory? I understand. He met Sareth's golden eyes. And I choose it anyway. Kelthus turned to Sareth. Do you, Queen Sareth, ruler of 3 systems, keeper of ancient flame, accept this bond, knowing his life will be brief and his death will wound you? I accept. Her voice resonated through the temple. Brief love is still love. Brief life still has meaning. The ritual continued with exchanges David barely processed. He was too focused on Sareth, on the reality of what they were doing. Then came the exchange of tokens. He had agonized over what to give her. Dragons traditionally exchanged treasures, but he had nothing valuable by their standards. In the end, he chose honesty. From his pocket, he pulled a small book, its cover worn from years of handling. This was my father's journal, David said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. He wrote about history, about teaching, about why learning matters. It's one of the few things I have left of him. You've taught me so much about preserving memory and honoring the past. I want you to have this peace of mind. Sareth took the small book in one massive claw, cradling it like it was made of glass. I will treasure this. Then she shifted, her form flowing into something more human-sized. From around her neck, she removed a single scale, deep blue and still warm. This scale grows over my heart. By giving it to you, I give you the most vulnerable part of myself. Wear it, and know you are protected by all that I am. David took the scale. It was surprisingly light, and it pulsed with warmth against his palm. He slipped it onto a chain around his neck, feeling the heat settle against his chest. Kelthus raised his arms. Then let the bond be sealed. Magic erupted between them. David felt it like lightning in his blood, racing through every nerve. Sareth's presence flooded his mind, vast and ancient and overwhelming. For a terrifying moment, he thought he would drown in it, be swept away by the sheer weight of her existence. Then her thoughts touched his, gentle despite their power. I have you. You are safe. The magic stabilized, settled. David could feel her emotions now, a constant awareness at the edge of his mind. Her love, fierce and protective. Her fear of losing him eventually. Her joy that he had chosen this anyway. And underneath it all, a loneliness finally easing after 200 years. He sent back his own feelings. Awed her strength. Gratitude for her choice. Love that felt impossibly big for having known her such a short time. And his own fear, matched with determination. They would make this work. However long they had, they would make it matter. The crowd erupted in cheers. Dragons roared approval. Other species applauded or made whatever celebratory sounds their biology allowed. David barely heard it. He was too focused on the incredible woman before him, now bound to him in ways he was only beginning to understand. Sereth shifted back to her smaller form and pulled him into an embrace. "Hello, my bonded," she murmured against his ear. "Hello yourself." David held her tight, feeling her heartbeat synced with his own through the bond. "We really did it. We really did." "Any regrets?" He pulled back to look at her. Not even one. They kissed while the crowd cheered and cameras recorded, and the sun rose higher over the mountain temple. Somewhere in the back of David's mind, he felt something new, an extension to his own life force, a gift from the bond itself. Not immortality, but time. Maybe twice what he would have had. Enough to build a real life together. Enough to make the eventual grief worthwhile. For now, though, there was only joy. Only this moment, this person, this impossible, beautiful choice they had both made. Everything else could wait. That end of part 5. The first year of bonding was adjustment. David learned to filter the constant awareness of Sereth's presence in his mind. She learned to give him space while still feeling his emotions. They fought occasionally, usually about stupid things like whether Earth coffee was better than dragon tea. The bond made lying impossible, which was both wonderful and occasionally infuriating. David refused to become a traditional consort. Instead, he created something new, a position he called cultural ambassador. His job was to help dragons understand the dozens of shorter-lived species they ruled. He started exchange programs, bringing students from various worlds to study dragon history, while dragon students learned about faster-moving cultures. The work was harder than teaching high school ever was, but also more rewarding. He watched young dragons develop empathy for species that lived and died within what seemed like moments to them. He saw humans and Voltorians and Kesh gain appreciation for dragon patience and long-term thinking. And he still cleaned sometimes. Once a week, David would spend a few hours helping the maintenance staff, usually in the archives or library. The other workers thought he was crazy. Sereth thought it was endearing. He just thought it kept him grounded. 0.5 years in, an extremist movement tried to challenge his position. A dragon warrior named Grath publicly declared that David's influence was weakening dragon traditions. He demanded a trial by combat, which David would obviously lose. Humans were not built for fighting dragons. David studied the ancient laws until his eyes hurt, then found a loophole. Trials could take many forms. He challenged Grath to a competition of cultural knowledge instead. The arena was packed. Grath clearly expected easy questions about recent history. Instead, David asked about dragon poetry from 2,000 years ago, about the philosophical writings of ancient dragon scholars, about art movements and musical traditions and culinary history. Grath struggled. He had spent his life training for war, not studying his own culture. David, who had spent 5 years reading everything he could about dragon civilization, answered question after question, not to humiliate Grath, but to show how much dragon culture deserved to be known and celebrated. By the end, Grath was not angry. He was ashamed. "I have lived 400 years and know less about my people than a human who has been here 5. "Then let me teach you," David offered. "That's what I do." Grath became one of his first students. The extremist movement collapsed when their champion joined David's cultural education program. Within a year, that program was teaching thousands of dragons about their own history, creating a renaissance of interest in traditional arts and philosophy. The years flowed past like water. David's hair started graying. Sereth remained ageless. They traveled to other worlds, met with alien leaders, built bridges between species that had never understood each other. David wrote extensively about his experiences. His books became required reading in diplomatic schools across 3-star systems. By year 20, David was famous in his own right. Not as the Queen's consort, but as David the Bridge Builder. He had changed how the Dragon Empire interacted with shorter-lived species. Policies that once took centuries now had provisions for shorter-term benefits. Council meetings included perspectives from humans and other brief-lived races that he missed Earth, but visited when he could. Sarah had gotten married, had children. David's niece and nephew called him Uncle David and thought it was incredibly cool that he lived with dragons. His sister teased him about being space royalty. He still denied that was accurate. Year 35, a human delegation arrived requesting David's help with a crisis. One of Earth's colony worlds was in dispute with a dragon-allied system over mining rights. The conflict threatened to turn violent. David spent 3 months mediating. He understood both sides because he had lived as both, a struggling human trying to build a future and a dragon who thought in terms of centuries. The solution he proposed satisfied neither side completely, which meant it was probably fair. The peace treaty was signed in his name. High Chancellor Vorthen, now ancient even by dragon standards, called David to a private meeting afterward. "I oppose your bonding," Vorthen said bluntly. "I thought you would weaken us. I know, I was wrong. You have made us stronger by making us wiser. The Council votes to grant you an official title, First Ambassador of the Dragon Empire." Vorthen's expression softened. "And to thank you. We are better because you are here." David felt tears prick his eyes. Acceptance from Vorthen meant everything. "Thank you. That means more than you know." More years passed. David turned 67, then 70, then 75. The bond had extended his life as promised, but time still moved forward. His joints ached. His hair went white. He needed reading glasses for the first time. Sarah never mentioned his aging, but he felt her grief in their bond. The approaching end, still decades away, but visible now on the horizon. On his 80th birthday, the entire palace threw a celebration. Hundreds of people he had taught over the years attended. Grath gave a speech about how a human janitor had taught him to value his own culture. Ambassador Okonkwo, now retired, told embarrassing stories about David's early days. Even council members shared appreciative words. Sarah stood with him through it all, her hand in his. Through the bond, he felt her love, her pride, her sorrow, all mixed together, inseparable. That night, they walked through the garden where he had first agreed to the trial period. 48 years ago now. A lifetime for him. A moment for her. "Do you regret it?" David asked, knowing what comes next. Sarah stopped walking, looked at him with those ancient golden eyes. "Do you know what I regret? The 200 years I spent alone, too afraid to risk this pain again. Every moment with you has been worth what comes after. Even when I'm gone, especially then, because I will carry you with me. Your kindness, your curiosity, your absolute refusal to let status define worth. You changed me. You changed our entire civilization. That does not end when your body does." David leaned against her, feeling old and tired and completely content. "I love you. Have I mentioned that recently? Only about 40,000 times." He felt her amusement through the bond. "But I never tire of hearing it." They stood there as the sun set, two beings from different worlds who had built something beautiful together. David knew he had maybe 30 more years if he was lucky. Sarah had centuries stretching ahead, but for now, they had this moment. This garden, this love that had started when an immortal queen pointed at a janitor and said him. And somehow, impossibly, it had been exactly right. End of Part 6. The story of David and Sarah became legend. After his death at age 112, Sarah ruled for another 600 years, but she never bonded again. She kept his father's journal in a place of honor and established the David Chin Foundation for Interspecies Understanding. The foundation still operates today, teaching that worth is not measured in power or lifespan, but in how you treat others, in the kindness you show, in your willingness to learn. Humans still work as janitors in the Dragon Palace. But now, everyone knows their names. END.